let's start. So before we do, though, let me remind you that we will be taking questions related to the subject matter. It's going to be via the Q&A function on this Ring Central video conference. You can see it at the bottom. It's one of the icons that is there. I will be moderating, that question period, but after the presentation. I would urge all to send questions related to task management only. Should you have any questions related to other functionalities of the software, I should have taken more than 2 coffees. I would encourage you to contact our support team. Without further ado, let me introduce to you your trainer for today. This is Susan Fowler. She's our senior trainer at GenXScore, and she will guide you through the webinar. So Susan, take it over, please.
Good afternoon, good morning for some of you. As Gino said, I'm Susan, and I'm going to be walking you through basically work order management within the maintenance care system. So why is it important for you to understand how to manage work orders within the system? Some of you might be new to maintenance care. Some of you might not have had maybe all of the training sessions that you might have needed. We're going to walk you through that today, but it's important because maintenance care is a really easy system to use. There's lots of layers to it. But when it comes to work order management, it's really simple. There's simple, easy steps. It's simple to navigate. You just might not know that some of those easy steps are just within a click of your mouse, okay? So we're going to talk about how to do that today, how to set up your primary task page so you can see it and you can navigate it easily, how you can find work orders, how you can sign work orders, things like that, okay? So first and foremost, when you first log in, this is probably what your page is going to look like, right? You will be in the status task list, and over to the left, there will be all the different navigation points that you have access to. But for some of you might not see this screen when you log into maintenance care. It might look a little bit different. So we're going to walk you through how to upgrade to this version, which is Bolt, okay? There's a little icon that I'm going to go to, and I'm just going to click on it, and I'm going to take us to the classic version. Okay, so this is the older version of maintenance care. This is what it looks like. If you are in this version of maintenance care, you will want to upgrade to the new Bolt, and it's really simple and easy to use as far as going and navigating through. If you click right in the middle of your screen, you see how it says there, try Bolt new look? You're going to click, and it's going to go, welcome to maintenance care Bolt. And then I'm just going to get rid of that screen. It'll eventually disappear. And this is what it will look like when you move from classic version or the older version of maintenance care to the new Bolt version, which is really not that new anymore. It's a couple of years old now, but that's how you can sort of navigate through. Eventually, the classic version will probably be, removed from the interface, but that's not going to be for a while. But functionality is all within the Bolt system. Now, one of the things that you probably don't know is that when you do that upgrade, your column headings are going to come to your browser setting from Classic. So if you had column headings that are already preset, then they will come over and be to the default column headings when you upgrade to Bolt. But we're going to address that in just a second. First things, when you log in the upper right corner of the Bolt system, you'll see this little icon that has a person inside it, a little circle with a torso. This has a couple of functionalities in it. It has a setting functionality and it has a logout functionality. These are the two that we're going to sort of focus on. One of the things that you should try and remember to do when you are exiting the maintenance care system is trying to remember to log out through here rather than getting rid of your browsers, which we are all guilty of. Logging out of here, just make sure that you actually log out of the maintenance care system rather than just removing your browsers. Sometimes what will happen is if you disconnect from maintenance care here, sometimes cached information will stay and it might cause an error. So you want to try and make sure that you log out properly. But
Susan,
more importantly, we're going to go up here to settings. Yes?
So sorry,
Yes?
there seems people are saying that some of them are not seeing the screen shared and are hearing music. I've got no clue. I don't have any music
I have
on.
no music on
No,
mine
me
and
neither.
either. No.
Okay, someone
Okay,
is
so
asking just if so I'm not sure. Can you just take off your screen share and then come back to it, please?
yes,
Sorry about
I
that.
absolutely will do that. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. So I'll stop my screen sharing. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, and I'm going to share again. And I'm going to share my entire screen this time. It might be a little bit easier. And hopefully that clears everything up for everybody and they should be able to see my screen now.
Yes, we can see your
Everybody's good
screen.
now? Okay,
I think so.
great. Anybody still have that background noise? Unfortunately, I can't do anything about it. I can't hear anything on my
No, me
headset.
neither.
Okay. All right, so let's sort of regroup and go back to where we were. Okay, so in the upper right corner of the Bolt system, if you've upgraded from Classic to Bolt, there's an icon that has a little circle with a person in front of it. If you click on it, it's going to open this little window. We were talking about logging out. Now, hopefully everybody can see the screen. And I emphasize logging out of maintenance care this way rather than getting rid of your screen via the browser just by exiting out, which, I told you everybody's guilty of. You want to try and remember to do that. Okay. It'll avoid some errors that might pop up because it will actually log you out of the system. But this is where we're going to go. We're going to go to settings. Okay. Now, when you go to settings, there's a button here in the upper right called more settings. There's two things that we're going to look at here: display settings and mobile app settings. Display settings is where you can actually go in and set up your display settings from what the default may be. So when we're talking about setting up your display settings, you're basically setting up your task list to provide you information as a default. And there's a few things that you probably want to do. And one of them is maybe changing the grid page size. Okay, grid page size on the task list is basically how many work orders can I see at one time. And the default on the list is 15. Up here, 2550 is probably the best as far as setting your grid page size, depending on your volume of work orders. You can manually change it, and I'll show you how to do that. But again, this is where you can adjust it. Okay, number of days. So default date range for number of days is 7. I've adjusted mine to 30. That's because I use the mobile app, and that's really important to remember. So I'm almost mirroring the way I have my app set up, which is a 30-day window of work orders. Highlight priority. I can check and uncheck any box that I want. I have mine highlighted. I could actually also click active if I want to filter as a default to active rather than using my filter on the task list. But again, these are very much choices that you will make to set your system up. Okay, these are only guidelines that I'm giving you. Date format. So again, you'll see a lot of these little menus within maintenance care and everything defaults to the top of the list. You can go in and change your date format to whatever you want. And then you can change your calendar day too. But basically, this is the standardized display settings. So you set these settings, we don't set these settings, and this will allow you, when you log in, to see the information that you want to see. Now, the other thing is people might not know that there are ways to turn on mobile app notifications. You actually have to log into the system to do that. Two primary notifications that you can turn on is a notification on the mobile app for all new work orders and then assigned to me. Those are the two standard ones that are utilized by most of our customers. You can actually go in and play around with some of the notifications, but just remember every time that you do turn on a notification, you're going to get a notification. So maybe try and keep it simple. But again, these are the two primary ones as far as the system goes. Okay. So I'm just going to turn mine off because we don't need to get any alerts right now. So I've made my changes. I'm going to save, and then I'm just going to cancel out, and that's going to take me back to my task list. Okay, so what did we do? What did I change, or what did I just reinforce? My date range up here in my filter. Okay, 30 days is what I set, and then there's my grid page down there. Like I said, you can manually change this, right? I can go up to 200, I can go down to 15. You determine what you want to set here. Again, It's very much a personal choice. It will always tell me at the bottom of my screen how many work orders I'm seeing. So again, if I need to change it, I can just do that. And then I can scroll up and down and I don't have to page over. Okay, so again, the maximum to view based on the date range is 200. Okay, so really simple fix, nothing complicated. And again, that requires you logging into the main system and making those adjustments. Now let's talk about the column headings, because this is one of the things that I get a lot of questions on. Is there's a lot of information when I log into maintenance care and I don't know how to navigate it so it's not so overwhelming in my view. It's a really good question to ask because you might not need all of this information in your view. So what you want to do is you want to probably streamline your view down to basic information and then add to it. And that's what we're going to do right now. I'm going to show you how to do it. It's really easy to do. Any one of the column headings here on my screen, you'll see how when I put my mouse over top of it, it sort of turns color and there's a little arrow there. Okay, doesn't matter which one I go to, I can go to any one and I will get that little arrow. If I click on that little arrow, I get this little box that pops up and I can sort this column, but this is what I'm looking for, this static setting. If I come over here, same thing, static setting. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to start either checking or unchecking boxes. And what I usually recommend, especially at the start of using a system, is think about your request page and the information that goes in on the request page. And the request page, remember, is what staff members would be using to put a work order in. What's on it? Well, the task type is on it. So I'm going to make sure that that's checked off. I've taken out my task number and I can add that back in if I want, but right now I'm going to streamline my view. Remember, the task number is inside the work order and you determine the view that is more appropriate for you. Task type, okay, so that's definitely one I want. I need the area. What area is the problem in, or where is the work order? The room, the comments. The comments are what the problem is or what needs to be done. The date it was created, that's automated within maintenance care. So I definitely want to see the date that it's created, who submitted it. And then I'm just going to sort of make my way down the list till I have everything I need, till I get to the very bottom in status. So just by unchecking those boxes, my view became very simplified. Type of work order, the area, the room, the comments, the date it was created, who submitted it, and the status. Now I look at this and it's not so busy and it's a little bit easier for me to navigate. As I make my way through starting to use the system, then I'm going, well, I need to know who the work order is assigned to. Well, again, I can go to any one of my columns and I can add the assigned to column, right? I can add whether or not there's an attachment and it shows up with a little paper clip. Just like in an email, it shows up with a little paper clip, okay? I want to know how old the work order is. So again, I am able, just with a little click on the little box, to determine the information that I see and is necessary to me, okay? So always go down to a streamlined view and add to that view. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we get into work order management. The other thing you probably don't know is you can actually adjust the column size. So if I'm adding or removing columns, I can adjust them. I can also move them. So for example, if I want area over here, I can just click and drag it. And then again, as I'm adding or removing columns, I can adjust them. Okay. One thing to remember about column settings, they are adjustable through all parts of the system. So any part that you might have access to will allow you to go in and adjust your columns to provide you the view that you need to see. There's always a default view in all of the columns in any part of the system, but that doesn't mean that's the defined view, right? You can change that view. Okay, so let's talk about the filter. You probably know about the filter because you've probably used it, and that's probably something actually that is part of the functionality that you are very aware of because you have the ability to go back and find information. What you might not know is that there is a new filter in the Bolt called sticky filter. And you can see that in this filter, there's a 0, which means I have no filter set. And this is important to remember because as you start adjusting the filter, you're going to start to see numbers populate in there. And probably one of the most common filters is the active filter, right? And the active filter is going to be the one that most of our customers use, especially when they're logging into the system. The default date range, remember that 30-day is a pretty large window, but also too, if you're navigating between the main system and the mobile app, you're seeing the same information, which is really important for work order management. Okay. Now remember, up in my account setting, I could make that part of my default if I wanted to, which means that every time I log in, it will show active and it doesn't affect my sticky filter. Okay, so something to remember for everybody. Okay, so you'll see that there's a 1 in there, and I might keep that even if I refresh my browser or if I log out and log back in, it's going to keep this filter unless I hit reset. So as I start to look for information or I open my date range up to search for information, it will keep that filter. So that's something to remember. If you're not seeing information, then you need to make sure that you check and hit your reset filter and go back basically to your standard default filter. Okay. Now, one of the things to remember too is that you have the ability to search for information. Most everybody is aware of this, but we're going to sort of just recap. You can go back for as far as you've been using the system or the system has been active, which means I have the ability to go back a couple of years if I want to and search. And I can search by keyword, I can search by room number, I can search by who it's assigned to. The important thing to remember is going back to the date range that's going to be applicable. The other thing that people might not be aware of is you can actually print your work orders, which means if I want to have a hard copy of one work order, I can just click on it just like this, and it highlights across the screen, and I can print this page. If I want to have like a few work orders and I want to print either a single hard copy or a list, and maybe I have a contractor coming in, right? I can actually click and I can print myself a list. So if you have somebody that's maybe coming in to help you with some odd jobs and you just want to print them a list of what they have to do, you can do that. If you have a contractor or an outside vendor coming in to do things, you can print what you need them to do and you can print that list off. Okay. So those are some of the things that you might know or might not know when it comes to work order management. Okay. Now, one thing that you also might not be aware of, and this is definitely a big change from the classic version to the new version of maintenance care, is there's an icon up here in the upper right corner, just directly beside the little icon that takes you to account settings. It looks like a little gear. So we're going to actually click that gear. This opens up a window called the user interface setting. You can play around with this a little bit. You can change your navigation and things like that, because right now your navigation is over to the left. If you're more comfortable, especially if you're just upgrading to the classic version, you could change your navigation to the top. But what we want to turn on is this, and this is really important to remember as part of your work order management. And we will definitely sort of regroup and go through this again. You want to turn on the sidebar, okay? The sidebar is going to give you stats information, and it's going to give you filters. And we're going to talk a lot about managing a work order and the importance of these filters. In the old classic version, this would have been the ticker that was on your primary screen just above your column headings. Okay. Now, the one thing about the default sidebar here that you're turning on, every time you log in, as soon as you log in, it's going to open up. You can hide it if you want to. Okay, it's easy to do, but every time that you log in, it's going to open up. The other thing to remember about the sidebar, and probably the most important thing about the sidebar, is if you go down to the very bottom, you'll see last updated with a date and time. Now, there are two arrows over here to the right. You're going to click those arrows and it's going to update it to the current date and time, which means that all of the information that you're seeing here is current to what is in the system at this time. How many work orders, how many delayed work orders, how many reopens, and the filters here. Now, if you happen to be managing multiple licenses, this is also where you can actually filter by each of the licenses. and get a really quick general overview on how they're doing just by doing an update to each of the licenses. So you just have to go in and click, and then you can go ahead and look. And what you're looking for basically is, this looks like a pretty good managed system, even though I'm not a maintenance person. So I have to pat myself on the back there. So again, really simple and easy, right? I can easily monitor if I have to. So if one of my job requirements is to log in and monitor my team, I can easily do it by just logging in and looking and adding the sidebar and checking the filters, making sure that it's updated. Okay, that's a key point. And if I'm looking at this, I don't see any red flags. Most of the work orders in the last 30 days are managed. Preventative maintenance is triggering. I've got my trending looks good. Everything's good. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about these because these will be part of monitoring too. Both yourself as a maintenance person logging in and anybody that might be doing a general oversee of multiple licenses or executive director or anything like that. Okay. So again, we're going to go ahead and hide that sidebar. When we talk about managing a work order, the first thing that you need to remember is that there is always some sort of accountability. There has to be some sort of status change. Time has to be tracked. Notes have to be added, and there's a signature. And just because there are those steps, it doesn't mean all of them are part of your workflow. Those are just the options that are available for you to track things within the system. If you remember at the very beginning, it's simple and easy to maintain documentation within maintenance care and to track work orders and maintenance care. The main system obviously is a great, fantastic big picture tool, right? And then you have the mobile app as that advantage where you can actually take the system with you wherever you go and do the standard documentation that you need to for work orders, okay? If we decide that we are going to manage a work order, we talked about those simple steps, right? There can be accountability if you want that part of your workflow. You can assign to people. Work orders can be assigned back if that person's responsible, but let's talk about simplifying work order management. When we talk about moving from maybe paper to technology, it doesn't mean that the type of work order management changes, right? What it does is means that you have the ability to find information very quickly rather than on paper or relying on your memory. You now have a system that can provide the information at a click of a mouse. And if you need to report on things, you can find the information in a very quick and easy way. When we're talking about status changes, it's not complicated to move things forward to completing a work order. Within the maintenance care system, we have defined status changes. Probably the three most common are going to be closed, pending, and delayed. And obviously, we can all agree this one is the best, right? Closed work order, done, off my plate. But it doesn't necessarily mean that every single work order gets closed right away. There are things that might happen that stop you from actually closing the work order because you might need to do something to get something to close the work order. You might need to order a part. You may need to call a contractor. Maybe you need somebody to sign off because there's a cost associated. Many different reasons why a work order can't be completed. And that's where you would move to pending. So within pending, that's a work in progress, right? Pending means that I've started it, but I haven't completed it. Not very complicated, right? You do that on paper right now. Even if you are just recently moved to a maintenance system, you had some sort of system in place where you track that. Within maintenance care, it's highly visible and it's easy to find. Then you have delayed. So delayed is actually pushing a work order out, and you will have noticed that in our sidebar, we saw a delayed work order in there. We're going to talk a little bit about how delaying works within the system. If you're delaying a work order, my recommendation is always to delay it to a day before something happens, because you want to make sure that that contractor is still coming or that part's still going to arrive rather than day of. Do you need to do that? No, it's only a recommendation, but it makes it easier to sort of keep on track of things. It's like, oh yeah, that part's supposed to arrive tomorrow. and I'm going to call and make sure that it's going to arrive, or I'm going to check my email or whatever it might be. Okay. When you delay something, it's going to date and timestamp everything within your system here. Okay. And we're going to talk about reopened in a second, but let's go to excluded. So within excluded is basically a rejected work order, right? And it means that this is not something that maintenance does, or it's duplicate, which sometimes can happen. But excluded is basically we're not going to manage it. It's not going to be part of our workflow numbers because it's not something that we do. Okay. Pretty simple and easy. When it comes to reopened, and you'll see this when we go to our sidebar in a second, can you reopen a work order? Yes, you can. And it's really up to you if you do. The one thing to remember about reopening a work order is that in the maintenance care system, it's still one work order. So you're relying on your memory. You're better off putting in another work order to track it. But there's another reason why reopen shows up here. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So those are basically the status changes. Then we have duration, right? Duration is how much time it took to do the work. Now, maintenance care will track 2 times. One is called resolution time, right? Resolution time is basically the date and time stamp that it comes in till eventually it's completed, right? And that could be 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, right? Longer too, depending on the type of work order it is. Resolution or duration is how much time I actually took to do the work, okay? So again, if I'm managing this work order and I'm going to maybe close it and I'm going to put my time in, okay? Or if it's going to pending, I'm going to put my time in and how much time I've spent so far on this work order, okay? Then we're going to get to notes. Now, this work order was already assigned, okay? So now the next step is to put in my notes. It was assigned to me. I'm going to pretend that I'm Neil. And now I've started this process. So the most important part of any work order is notes, because you have the ability, remember, to easily go back and find information, not just for you, but anybody else that might have access to the system too. So adding a note, what information is going to be important to you? And what I mean by that is if I go back 3 months from now and I look at this work order, what information is going to be important for me to know or someone else to know? Okay. And that's the kind of note that you should be putting in. Okay. It's information that you're providing to you yourself or your team as far as the system goes. So I might just go, first half of floor, oops, sorry, need to learn how to type, floor painted. And I can date and timestamp that. I don't know if anybody knows, but there are a little checkbox here, see? And it's basically a signature. In the mobile app is the same thing too, but it can put my date and timestamp in. So when you're closing the work order, if I was moving this to complete, I'd be putting in my last note and I would be putting my signature in. I can just put my name in if I want to here. Doesn't really matter. You're really in charge of your own notes. But when you delay the work order or if you assign the work order, it's going to document it in the notes anyways, okay? Your notes are just an additional value, okay? And then once you've got your status changed and you put all your information in, you're going to save. Okay. Now, if I wanted to know who the work order was assigned to, remember, if that is part of my workflow, then I'm going to go to my column setting and I'm going to add my assigned to. Okay. So again, if my workflow is accountability for my team and part of our workflow is documenting who's doing the work or who the work order has been assigned to, I definitely want to know who that is. And that's just a really simple thing, right? So when we're talking about logging into the system now, I'm managing my work orders, so I know how to do that. That's really simple. And I know that I can filter by active, right? Which means that gives me everything that's open. So if I'm first logging in, I'm going to look at my active work orders and I can see that I have a reopen and I've got some pending. And I'm probably going to look at my pending first. So I can easily go in and change my filter to pending. And then I can look at where I am on these pending work orders, or I can talk to my team and tell me where I am. And then if I want, I can add the notes column. And this is something that you might not know. It's really easy to navigate through and look at notes without spending a lot of time. Just by adding this column, I can just click on the little icons and it will give me my notes and I'll go, okay, I'm all good. I have no new information. I can look at my reopened and I can go and look at my new, make sure all my work orders are assigned. And then I can go back to my active list. Okay. Simple and easy. We're going to bring that sidebar back again because we want to talk about what shows up in the quick filters in the sidebar. When you delay a work order, like we talked about, it moves to the sidebar here. So my delayed work order is here. If I have 4 or 5 or 6 delayed work orders, they will always reside here, even when they come into my active list. And this is important to remember. It might show up in my active list as a delayed work order, which means I've delayed it to the day that it shows up, right? But it does not leave this part of the system. So if I had 6 delayed work orders in there, all 6 would still be there, even though 1 is in my active list. And this is the checks and balances within the maintenance care system that have been built into it that allow us to keep on top of things without spending a lot of time, but again, doing those checks and balances, right? So again, if I clicked on my delayed work order, I've got my notes column added now, remember? And I can look at all the notes on my delayed work orders. Oh, that part came in. I can go in and change that status to pending now because the part is here, update my notes, and now I only have 5 delayed work orders. So again, I'm checking first my open work orders within my 30-day filter or whatever filter I have set. And then I see I have a whole bunch of pending. I'm going to go and run through my pending work orders first. Maybe they have to be reassigned because maybe I have it assigned to a certain person and they're off on vacation right now. And now I can reassign it to somebody else. Okay. And then I could look and see if I've got any others, and then I can filter by new. And then again, I can go back to my active work orders. Okay. Older work orders. So this is something to keep in mind because this is a 30-day window, remember? So anything older is going to show up here. Again, I have the ability in a really quick and efficient way to be able to check on those work orders. Now, if you're doing this on a daily basis, so if you're sitting down at your computer in the morning, you should be looking and logging into maintenance care and getting a general idea on what is in the system and what you're doing. That means setting your filters and then going over here. Do I have any older work orders? Right? So if I'm checking that, I've missed a couple of new work orders. Well, if you monitor your system this way, it's really hard to miss those work orders coming in. Then I've got my delayed. Remember, we talked about that. And then we've got reopened. Now, we talked about reopened and how you can reopen, but what people might not know is there's another functionality to reopened. And that is when somebody puts a work order in through the request page, and if the email function in that field is part of it, there's an acknowledgement that goes out. And there are things within the system that you can turn on notifications, specifically for a closed notification as an example. Well, the person who got that notification can respond to that notification email, which means that in the maintenance care system, if you haven't reopened the email or reopened the work order, then it would flag it for an email response. So then if you go to your reopened, there will be an email here that would tell you, why it wasn't closed. Why did this accidentally get closed? So, and the reason that its functionality within maintenance care was used that way is because reopened actually is not something that's really utilized in the system. It just allows you to do it. So you don't usually reopen a work order, but it flags it really quickly for you, right? Because the numbers are so low with those stats. No, that doesn't mean you can't reopen a work order. You absolutely can. That's totally up to you. But it allows you to, again, navigate through some of those things that might fall into a little bit of an outside window. Okay, so we've got our general stats, which we can turn on, and we have to remember to refresh, right? We've got our little side icon here with the interface. We know that we can go into the settings up here and adjust our display settings. right, to give us the best view that works for us. Again, this is very much a personal setting. It's not something that we define, right? We also have the ability to turn on notifications on our mobile app if we're using that. Okay. We can also hide the sidebar and bring it back if we want to. We can also hide our filter that gives us a view of bigger screen. Okay. It will keep that setting unless I've preset it as my default here. And if I want to clear it, I can hit reset. Okay. All my functionality as far as my navigation points are over to the left. I can adjust my columns just by mousing over and clicking on that little arrow, right? And I can adjust the size and I can add or remove the information that's important to me. The filter also allows me to search for information and do a general query and print if I need to, either in a single or a list. Okay. So that's basically a recap of what we talked about. One other thing that I want to sort of just let you know too is over to the left navigation here, or if you decide to change your navigation to the top, you will see some icons. These two icons are really important to remember. This is customer support. There are three functionalities within support. There's an email, there's an online chat that is available Monday to Friday Eastern Standard Time. And there's a really fantastic wiki in here. We have people who have worked very hard on updating it and bringing it up to current information. You can get started. There's a mobile app. There's all sorts of information, keyword search. You can go over here and make your way through some of the parts of the system that you might not even be aware of. Remember, we do not control what you have access to in the system. There are people within your organization that will control your access or provide you different access. Okay, we cannot change access. That means access any parts of the system that you have. So again, some of the things that we talked about today are within the navigation part. There is written and visual instruction along with a lot of visual when it comes to video. Okay, and the videos usually run about a minute and a half, sometimes a little bit longer, depending on what they are. So you can sort of make your way through. Like I said, there's so many different ways to find information here. It's a really great resource. I do advocate for you guys using it, especially if you're trying to figure something out. And then, you know, call customer support if you need help, because we have a really great team of people that will be able to help you navigate some of those questions that you might have. Okay. Basically coming to the end of work order management, we're just going to do one sort of recap when it comes to this, and that is going to be managing the work order. Remember the simple steps: changing status, adding time, adding your note. You can also sign the work order. You can also put your signature in, which I do advocate for when you're closing it. It's sort of your checks and balances, especially with your preventative maintenance. Okay, and it comes from the scheduler set to a schedule, obviously. Compliance and regulatory or anything on a schedule, anything set by a person is basically either going to be entered by you or by the team members via the request page. The other thing to remember too is that if you want to filter your list, if you only want to see demand work orders, then you can just uncheck this little box and that will give you demand work orders. So again, remember it hit my filter. If I only wanted to see preventative maintenance, if I go over to the submitted by and I hit submitted by system, it will give me preventative maintenance. I also can say if it's submitted by Susan, it will give me everything sent in by Susan. And again, it hits my filter here. Okay, so I'm just going to click reset. All right, so we're basically at the end of that work order management. I think Dino's going to look to
Yes.
open up the general Q&A.
Yes, thank you. We already have some questions and comments. I'm gonna send them your way, Susan. Let
Okay.
me see here. Talking about the notifications, when you talked about the notifications in the setting, Rebecca is asking, can we activate these notifications through the admin side, or does it have to be done on individual profiles after they log in?
So the only people that will have access to actually changing the notifications is anybody who is a master user within your system and it's under your facility license. So you have to have access to this. And within your facility is the ability to turn on or turn off notifications. Now, this would have been probably talked about in your training session and discussed, but again, not everybody here, some of you might be longtime users or new users. The other notifications that we talked about are the mobile app notifications. You have to log in as yourself through the main system to turn those on.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Collins is saying, are you able to repeat the print section, please? I think
Sure.
I
I
wants to
absolutely
repeat to
can.
see how do you do that.
So remember, it's depending on what you're looking for. Again, filter, status. If I'm going to go and filter by active, so my filter, remember, is set by 30 days. And let's say I want to print off either one per page or a list. I'm going to hold down my mouse there and click so it highlights across the screen. I'm either going to hit my command key, depending on the type of computer, or my control key, and I'm going to click the ones that I want. And then I can just do a right click and I can print an individual page or I can print a list. Okay. If I want a list of everything, I can just click here and do either Command A if I'm Apple or Control A. That I'll do a Control All and I can print it again. Okay. I hope that helps.
All right, thanks. Rebecca is asking again, how do you use that dead set function on the task? Well, that's a bit complicated for you to explain today.
It's not part of work order management as
No,
we're doing this webinar today,
yeah,
but I would suggest reaching out to customer support to get some help. I imagine that we have more webinars that will be coming down through the pipeline over 2024. And I don't know if debt set is one of it, but my best response for that be reach out to customer
yes.
support and ask for some help and somebody will be able to connect with you.
Excellent, good answer. Eric is more of a comment. He says, I do use excluded for tasks that are finished that need reviewed that may trigger more tasks. That's the way he seemed to be using the excluded one, so that I think it's all related to internal
It is.
processes.
Yes, if that's your internal process, sure. Most of our customers use it as a rejected work order. So again, it's up to you and how you use that functionality. If that's how you
Yeah.
use it, as long as
Uh,
you're aware of it and you know when you're doing your general reporting, that's fine.
Good. Julianne is asking, when you assign a work order, do they need to be added to the system? I'm not sure if she means the people that are assigned the
Yes.
task order, or probably, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
To assign a work order to somebody, they have to be a user in the system. So yes, they have to be added to the system. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to give them access. Maybe you're going to print them a hard copy, right? But you just want accountability within the system so you can track, Joe the handyman did this work this week for me. And Joe is not logging into the computer. I'm printing him a list. So yes, they do have to have a user access account within the maintenance care system. Anybody who has master user access within your system, and again, you can call customer support and they'll be able to tell you who does have master user access. They can create that user within the system so you can assign work orders.
Excellent. John is asking, is there a way to preset the filter for date to today at all times? It seems that I have to reset the date every time that I go into the program.
Uh, you could set it at one day if you wanted to up in your filter. I don't understand how that functionality will work for you, but you can go up to your account setting and set it for one, and it will set it for one day. Okay.
Okay.
But I do caution that because you're going to have to remember that setting it for one day, other than resetting your filter, I could set it for one day here and it will keep that filter, right? Remember,
Mhm.
it's a sticky filter. But if you want it as your preset default, I think that, definitely you should be able to do it for one day, but that's totally up to you. But you can set it as a default rather than using your sticky filter.
Thank you. Roshi and Donna are asking questions that I think may need to be answered during a support call or with another webinar. Roshi's asking how to generate the weekly report. I think that should be was
Mhm.
part of the reporting 101 webinar, and you can also reach out to our support team for help. And Donna is asking, how do you create or make a scheduled task? Again, that's part of the preventative maintenance webinar that we did a couple, I think last month, I believe.
Yep. And
So
those are available on our webpage. If you want to go to maintenancecare.com, you'll be able to see those webinars on our webpage there.
perfect.
Also, to remember, you have to have access to that part of the system, and that's under the scheduler part of the system. And we don't define who has access, the master user within the system. And usually there's more than one master user will be able to change your access.
Perfect. Connie's asking, and that's for me to answer. Will this training be available to play back later? And if so, how to see it? Absolutely. We should be sending, once the video is uploaded on our YouTube channel or on our website,
Mhm.
should be getting an email. It takes about, I'd say, 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the job that they need to do to edit the video. And then they put it online, and then we send a mass email to everybody to get the link to watch it and play back later.
Yeah.
All right. Um, well, okay, again, I got the same questions about generating monthly reports. I think that needs to be done like through, like Susan said, via probably our support team or get into the
Mhm.
wiki. Are we, if not sure if this question is related to today's webinar, but I'll see Collins, are we able to alter or add data type? Not sure it's related to this
So
webinar.
if I'm understanding the question correctly, are you able to add information to the work order? And I'm going to sort of hope I'm on the right track here. Can you add documents to the work order? Yes. Can you add images to the work order? Yes. It's just like adding to an email. It has to reside somewhere to go in and grab it. Easiest way, obviously, to add information is using the mobile app because it's a mobile tool. Anything that you do add, again, attaches to the work order, and you can add that little attachment column. Remember the little paper clip? I'm hoping I'm answering that correct. So yes, you can add that information to a task, either in the
Perfect.
main system or the mobile app. Okay.
Okay. Randy's asking a good question that we are asked often is, how can you add multiple email addresses to a work order notification so that the person making the request is notified, but also I am notified when the task is complete?
So that's part of the administrative function of the system, which not a lot of people have. Within the task types, there are ways to add notifications to get an alert, or an email, actually, not an alert, when something comes in for a certain request type or a certain building area. And again, that would be something that if you do have access to that part of the system, I would recommend reaching out to customer support.
Excellent. Nathaniel brings up he's supplementing some information on the previous question from John about how to preset the filter bar to today.
Mhm.
He says, I believe that what he means is that the day will not always update to today when he opens up and probably opens up as system. So he says, I have the same issue where it will not always update to today. That's probably more of a they need to reset their filter bar, I'm guessing, Susan.
Well, if he's setting it in here, as an example, if we go here
Yes,
and we
go ahead.
set it to 1 day, right? Then by default, it should set to 1 day. And it will be a 24-hour clock, right? So you have to remember that. I think it's a 24-hour clock. Um, but you can do it in the filter. I just did it right here, and that's set for today with everything open. Now, it does affect my sticky filter because now I have two filters. It will keep that filter, remember, unless I change it. But yes, you would have to manually change it tomorrow and the next day and the next day because it's not a preset filter.
Okay,
And
I
if the
think that's what
preset's
he
not
meant.
working, and I'm not sure too, just to sort of answer your question again, it might be that the functionality within the system doesn't allow you to set the standard default filter to 1 day, right?
Okay.
So it might be, but you can definitely do here. But yes, you're going to have to adjust it every single day.
Perfect. I think that answers the question because he commented after that. For example, when I started today, the system and the tasks from was correct, but then it was yesterday's date
Yes.
or the last time I entered the system. So essentially that's it. So that's all the questions that I got. Any
Okay.
more? If not, we're going to end this right now. Thank you very much for your time, everybody, and
Thanks,
see
everybody.
you all to the next. The next webinar should be about another software that we have, which is CareClean, and that one will be held in May, somewhere in May. So watch out for the email coming out to register for that webinar. Thank you, Susan. Thank you to all.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Have a great day.